Begin the current Daf from Mesechta Rosh Hashanah Daf. Hey, begin 3 lines down the top of the Yomim. The Gemara is in the middle of a discussion of the previous Daf regarding the different opinions we had in the violation of Bal Ta'achar. And the Gemara was discussing what their sources are, and based on those sources, how do they learn certain halachas? Because they already use the psukim for different things. Should correspond to Kazakh and Cheskel, and Daf Chaim, which joining us today's Daf. So what we're going to discuss in today's Daf are the Issa Bal Ta'achar, the various types of pledges, meaning not just necessarily karbanis, for which one may be liable for this Issa. This important term, the concept we discuss about Ta'achar, which is the violation of delaying an obligation that you have towards Hashem. Erichin is the halacha that the Torah gives a certain value for a person based on their gender and their age. And if a certain person takes that vow, he has to give that amount. Charamim are either chermi gevaya, chermi kahanim, which are also a certain type of hektish. And tashlumim are the obligation to bring your karbanis, and that you have a certain amount of time to make it up on the Yom Tov. So we'll begin the current Daf of Hey, 3 lines down at the top of the Amid, where the Gemara is in the middle of a conversation, where we had opinions that Bal Ta'achar is after 3 Yom Tovim. We had those who said after 2 Yom Tovim. We had those who said after 1 Yom Tov, and specifically that 1 Yom Tov is Sukkot. And then we had even those who hold 3. Does it have to be any 3, or does it have to be that of specifically Pesach being first and Shavuos and Sukkot? Now, the Gemara had said that according to those who learned it out from that is 3 Yom Tovim, that's what they learned out from Chag HaMatzah, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos. According to those who learn out that it's only 2 Yom Tovim or 1 Yom Tov, what do they do with the pasuk Chag HaMatzah, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos? That's what the Gemara asked in the previous time. The Gemara says, they needed Lakushe to compare Shavuos to Pesach, just like Pesach has Tashlumin all 7 days, so too Shavuos has all 7 days. And what do you need then Chag HaSukkos for? That's to compare to Chag HaMatzah, to tell you that there's Lina, just like if you stay out overnight by Pesach, so too by Sukkot. Now that's where Gemara continues on the 3rd line from the V'Tana Kama B'Reb Shimon, that is the first Tana that says any 3 Yom Tovim, and Reb Shimon that says the first 3 Yom Tovim, which they already used that pasuk b'Chag HaMatzah, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos to tell you the halacha Bal Ta'achar, that why does it repeat the 3 Yom Tovim, to tell you another halachic application of Bal Ta'achar. So according to them, Tashlumin la'atzeres manalahu, where do they know the halacha that Shavuos, his carbon can be made up for 7 days? It's not, you don't have it because it's compared to Pesach. It's not what the pasuk is coming to tell you. The pasuk is coming to tell you the 3 Yom Tovim are the violation of Bal Ta'achar. And then Rashi points out, why aren't you also asking on your blessed Rabbi Shimon, who he was the one who held that it's after 1 Yom Tov of Sukkot, where from him he's also so on that he's learning out from that same pasuk where it didn't have to say Chag HaSukkos. So that says Rashi no, because he learns about Ta'achar from just that it repeats Chag HaSukkos, because he holds that's the primary one. And then you have extra in that pasuk, Chag HaMatzah, Chag HaShavuos, to compare Shavuos to Pesach, to tell you that just like Pesach has Teshlumin Shiva, so to the Shavuos. So he actually could be learning out both from that same pasuk. But according to the Tanakh Reb Shimon, that they already used all 3 Yom Tovim to tell you the halacha about Ta'achar, where would they know this halacha of Teshlumin 4? So it says the Gemara, Naftalim and the Tani Rabbi Shloimy. Interesting teaching. The Tani Rabbi Shloimy, he says, Amr Torah, in this discussion, tells exactly what is the understanding of this. But the Torah says, Minei Yamim. You count days. Meaning, like, for example, Rashi brings a pasuk about a slav, which it says that they're going to get it up until a month of days. So you see that the metrics of a month is counted in days. Now, in halacha, you count days, v'kadesh chaydesh. When you sanctify the month, which is Rosh Chodesh, if you're bringing the karbanis of Rosh Chodesh, what you do is that you're counting days up until you get to the month. Now, same thing is Mani Yamim, you count days, let's say by Svira, for Kadesh Atzeres, and then you sanctify Shavuos, because you're counting 50 days up to Shavuos. So it says, Rabbi Shloimy, the following comparison. Ma Chodesh Lemnuyav, just like you find by the Rosh Chodesh, by the month. The sanctification of Rosh Chodesh is one of its units. On the day of Rosh Chodesh, that's when you sacrifice the carbon. That's the time that's set for it. It's one of the days that you're counting, and you're counting days. And one of those units is the day that's sanctified as Rosh Chodesh. mean, you're not going to take an hour and say, oh, we got there, and this is the unit that's being sanctified. No, the units that you use to count up to the month, that unit is what's used for the kedusha of that to bring a carbon. Oh, so too Shavuos, the bringing of its karbonis, alim nuyav, is one of its units that you count for. Now, how do you count up to Atzeres to Shavuos? Like the name of the holiday, which is Shavuos, you count through weeks. Like it says, Shabbos Shabbos to me, Mistiyan has to be 7 full weeks. And therefore, that's how you know that the carbon of Shavuos could be brought for a week. Because we're comparing it to Rosh Chodesh. Just like over there, its carbon is sanctified by one of its units that used to count it, so too by Shavuos, one of the units that used to count it is going to be used for its carbonos. It says, wait a second. I should say that no, the Tashlum and the Batzeres is Chad Yomi. It should only be one day you could bring the carbonos, because it says Tisbiru Chamishim Yom. We know that the unit you count as Sfiras HaOmer is counted by days. So maybe Shavuos should only be one day you could bring the carbon. Samar Rabbi says, what do you mean? Atu Atzeres Yom, you think for Shavuos you only count days? Shavuot Loimanin, you don't count weeks? But the master said, we know for the halacha of Sfiras HaOmer, we count the days and we count the weeks. So one of its units is not just days, it's also weeks. And therefore the carbon could be allowed for the unit, which is a week. Moreover, as we said before, Chag Shavuos Ksiv. The Yom Tov, the holiday, is called the holiday of Shavuos, which is the weeks, the 7 weeks that lead up. And therefore, that allows us the unit of a week, of 7 days, for Teshuvah. And that's how they know this halacha of Teshuvah, but says not from because it's compared to Pesach again, because they use the pasuk for Chag HaMatzah, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkot to teach you that those 3 Yom Tovim is the Issa Bal Ta'achar. It's only the other mandam that don't learn it's 3 months. They say it's either 2 or 1. They learn it out from that pasuk. Okay, so that concludes the previous Gemara's discussion regarding these manda amrim regarding that of Bal Ta'achar. But now the Gemara goes back. Now we had said in the price in the previous daf, we were speaking about many different items that are included in the Issa Bal Ta'achar. We said there's Chiv Damim, there's Erechin, Chadramim, Hekteshes, Chatoyes, Hashamas, Oilish, Shlamim, Tzedakis, and Maisis, if you recall from the previous daf, the Brisa, Bechor, Meiser, and Pesach, Leked, Shich, and Pei. We said all these different things are also not just karbanos, they all have the Issa Bal Ta'achar. And that the Gemara goes back and asks that you're saying all these are included in the Issa Bal Ta'achar. Of Shalish Regalim, which was that Tana who was saying this Brisa of 3 Yom Tovim, Pesach by Mikra B'Regalimu? Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? Pesach is something that can be brought on the Yom Tovim? That to say that after 3 Yom Tovim you didn't bring the carbon Pesach, then you're going to violate this about Ta'achar? Pesach is something Kavele. Pesach has a set date. You could only bring it on the 14th of Nisan. So, if you sacrificed on Pesach, you did already. If you didn't bring it, it's rejected. You're not bringing it, then on Shavuos and then on Sukkot and say, you missed it 3 Yom Tovim, you have about Ta'achar. What's size about Ta'achar? I'm late in what? It's over. It's Avos Mana Batal Kabane. So how can you say that Pesach has halacha of Bal Ta'achar of 3 Yom Tovim? So on that, Amar Chizde says you're right. Pesach Kedinisva. Pesach was only taken together because generally when we say Bechor and Meiser, all those 3, we say Ezim Mekayman, they come together. Bechor and Meiser and Pesach are always the same categorical halachas or karbanas. So we said Pesach with it, but really it doesn't really make sense. It's not part of the list because there's no Bal Ta'achar or carbon Pesach. That's one interpretation. Sheshami says, no, you know what it means, my Pesach? It means Shalmei Pesach. What happens is if let's say you didn't bring the carbon Pesach on Erev Pesach on the 14th of Nisan. Why? Because you had lost the carbon Pesach. Your wife told you to keep it in that place. If the Shlamazel is you got lost, now you had to go get another carbon Pesach and you got to talk about the other one. What happens to the first one that you end up finding after, look at this, on Yom Tov we hear the animal there, you left it in the shed, didn't you realize? So now it becomes a shlamim. As the Gemara learns in Pesach, that's how you die in Now, that shlamim, if you delay it 3 Yom Tovim, then you're going to violate Bal Ta'achar. So when we say Pesach, we mean the Shalmei Pesach, the Pesach that becomes the carbon shlamim, which is called the Moiseh Pesach. There's discussions regarding these different types of Shalmei Pesach, but it's a Pesach that became a shlamim. So the Gemara says, Yachayim shlamim. We already said in the list, a shlamim, a peace offering. This shlamim, this Pesach basically it becomes a shlamim. It's a Shalmei Pesach. So what do you have to say Pesach? Says Gemara, no, I'll tell you why. Tana shlam haboy machmas Pesach. We mentioned shlamim that come because of a Pesach, in this case of the Shabbat Pesach. And with Tana shlam haboy machmas Pesach, we said the generic shlam that come as originally as a shlam. Why you have to say both? So you would have thought to say hoylu machmas Pesach also, since ultimately this shlam is coming through the dint of the of a Pesach. It translated into a shlamim as we continue the days. So you would have thought to say ke Pesach damu, that it would have the same halachic qualification of the transition of a Pesach, and therefore by the first Yom Tov you should already violated like Pesach. You violated right away because that's the last stop you could have is according to Nisan. So you thought you would violate it right away like the Pesach itself. Rosh Hashanah was saying no, it has the same halacha like a regular shlamim, which you're going to have the 3 Yom Tovim for the Isra of Baltach. Now the Gemara says, in general, from where do we know that regarding all the things that we had mentioned in that Bryce on the previous Daf, which had a long list, that there's an Isra about Ta'achar regarding them, that there's a prohibition of delaying the obligation of what you're supposed to bring. So the Gemara said, like we learned in the Bryce, there's a pasuk in Devarim that says, Kisider Neder. If you're going to go ahead and make a vow, and the pasuk there continues, this is Perich of Gimel Pasuk of Beis, it says, L'Hashem Elikechet, Hashem your God, this is where the halacha is brought in the pasuk. Don't delay paying it up. Because God's going to demand it of you. You're going to have a sin that you didn't bring it. That's the whole pasuk. Now the Brisa breaks apart the pasuk piece by piece to show all the different terminologies in this pasuk. What is referring to show and illustrate these halachas we mentioned in the Brisa the previous Daf. So when it says kisider neder, so okay, right off the bat you already see ein le'ela neder. So you already see one of the items you mentioned in the Brisa, which is explicit in the pasuk. If someone took a vow means harei alai, which is that he's taking responsibility that he has to go ahead and bring this thing to the Beis Hamikdash. Now, nedava, which is similar but different, it's what's called a donation, but you're saying harei zu, which you're not taking responsibility. You're saying this is going to go. Whatever happens to this is not my responsibility anymore. This already has the sanctity. Harei alai is I'm taking responsibility. It's on me. So in the nedava, how do you know that that's also going to have an isabal ta'achar? So says the Gemara, because nemer kan neder. Over here in this pasuk it says vow. It says the pasuk in the Yikra im neder or in the dava. When you bring karban, it says if you take a vow or in the dava. So we see from there malahal in the dava. You may just like when we talk about neder, the dava is included with it. Avkan the dava. You may also over here in terms of neder, it has the qualification of the dava with it. Okay, the pasuk continues. L'Hashem Elokecha. If you're going to go ahead and take a vow for Hashem your God, what do you mean for Hashem your God? Elu, this refers to hadamim. When someone takes a monetary obligation to the Beis Hamikdash, harachin, or someone that takes a set value which the Torah gives to the gender and the age of the person. When you say er koyolai or er kiyolai, v'charamim, which is the chayrim vow, which is another type of hekdesh, v'hekdeshes and the sanctifications, which these all go to the bedek habayis, and they're all going to Hashem, and the Kohanim don't get anything from these things. That's L'Hashem Lekecha. That's alluded to in those words. When the pasuk continues and says, "Lo ta'achar l'shalmoi," do not delay in paying it up. What's l'shalmoi in the directive distinguished of it? It's telling you on it you're going to violate, which is who, which is the actual item itself, v'lechilufav, and not its exchange. Which we're going to explain which exchange are you talking about that you're telling me that doesn't have the isabal ta'achar. When the pasuk continues, it says, "Why? Kitarish yidir shena," because Hashem is going to demand it, is going to seek it from you. What is that referring to? It refers to the sin offerings and the guilt offerings, which they're demanded from you because it's an obligation for you to bring when you committed an aver to bring a chatz nashim. And also includes oilais ushlamim, the totally burnt offerings and the peace offerings. What I mean, those are not obligations. So says Rashi, yeah, for example, oilais re'iyah and the shama chagiga, which those are obligations on the Yom Tov. Because as Rashi explains, if you think it would refer to an oil or shlam that could be rose net in the dava, we already said that in the beginning of the pasuk. And the same thing says Rashi actually would include B'chor and Meiser and Pesach, which are also obligations. We would also know they're about ta'achar from these words of Darish Deshena, because it's demanded of you because of its obligation. Additionally, when it says at the end of the pasuk, because the beginning of the pasuk already said Hashem Lekecha, the next words in the pasuk are again Hashem Lekecha. What's that referring to? So Elu Tzedakah, this refers to Bal Ta'achar of charity, umaisris, and the tithes, ubachar, and of the firstborn animal, which, as Rashi says, these words are superfluous, because it could have just said, ki darashit yushena. It already said Hashem Lekecha in the beginning of the pasuk. So therefore it's coming to include these items, tzedakahs and maisris and bukhairis, that the pasuk says by them Hashem Elikecha, as we find in Dvarim Chav Daled, it says L'chot tiyeh tzedakah of Hashem Elikecha, and it says by Meiser and Bechor it says V'chat l'fnei Hashem Elikecha, Meiser digancha u'Bechor, as the Bach adds on the word Mekarcha v'Tzeinecha. So all these items mentioned in their context of their pasuk Hashem Elikecha. So when you're repeating again this pasuk Hashem Lekecha, it's to say to include these items that also say Hashem Lekecha, to say they also have Baal Ta'acha. And when the pasuk continues, it says Hashem, your God, is going to seek in me'imach from you. What's the word me'imach coming to say? Zeleket shekhlopei. This refers to the mountain Saniyim, of the gleanings of the stalks that fall down, and the bundles that you forgot, and the corner that you leave it. It's a portion for the pauper, which it says in Shmos Chabeis es ha'ami imach. So when it says imach, it's referring to the poor that's with you, to tell you that imach, those mountains also have halach Baal Ta'acha. And when the pasuk finishes and says that there's going to be sin in you if you don't pay up on time, teaches but your carbon will not be considered having a sin, meaning the carbon does not become invalidated by being left over by the 3 Yom Tov. The person has committed a sin, but there's no sin in the carbon, and the carbon is still a valid carbon. That's the brisa. Now Amar, the Gemara goes back to explain the brisa.
The Kehana can also be able about that if they don't bring the Oilas Tamid, let's say?
If they don't bring the Oilas Tamid, but that's Avizman the Betel Kalmane. It's not going to have Shalosh Regalim.
On that day, right away.
On the day. Right. So that's like we said we're going to Carbon Pesach. We said no Baal Ta'acha because
it's a bit of It's a bit of
yeah, there's Tammuz that in the Torah to bring a carbon oil. I don't know if there would be a Baal Ta'acha because it's there's no this is only right now. There's no delaying. There's no time else but right now to bring it.
A regular carbon, there was also an age when you could bring it. So technically, if the behavior gets to be older, then you can bring it. Cannot bring it older than 2 years or.
Right, which in Karban is a Keves is in the first
so
year.
If he's late, then it's also over Epis.
Yeah, I'm saying it could be that
you're a bit less saying again.
Right, yeah, but we'll see actually by tzedakah on the next daf that regarding certain things you do violate right away, but that's because there is still time to bring it. Here there's no other time to actually bring it but that day. So so the Gemara goes back to explain the brisa we had mentioned in the discussion, which actually wasn't even one of the primary reasons why we brought in the brisa. We really brought in to show that whole listing of things where it's included. But in the brisa, one of the drashas it said was Lo ta'achal l'shal moi. Don't be late in paying it up. What's it up? So who we said it and not its exchange. Meaning if there's a swapping of this carbon, that exchange does not have the halacha Baal Ta'acha. So we must say, wait a second. Which exchange of which of these items are you talking about? If you're talking about that there was an exchange of the oil and shlamim, what does that mean? For example, let's say there's actually 2 different girsas. The girsa we have in the Bach actually switches around, but the girsa as we have it. For example, let's say the oil got lost. Then they separate another one. Okay, I don't have my carbon oil, so they separate another one to take its place. And then they find the first one, and they have an atonement with it, with the original one. They found the first one, so they brought the first one. So now you have the chiluf, the exchange that you had separated to take the place of the oil, but you didn't end up needing it. So if that's the case, so you tell me that there's not going to be Baal Ta'acher on that chilufe, what do you mean, Mikra Karvi? It is sacrificed as an oila which you had separated to take its place, and since it's sacrificed, so it's its own carbon, so why shouldn't it be l'shalmai? Why shouldn't it qualify for this Baal Ta'acher like any regular carbon, like a regular carbon oila? And ichiluf chatas, and if you're going to tell me that it's referring to an exchange of a chatas, meaning, and you ended up finding the original chatas, which that's what's called chatas shekipru ba'aleha. The owner got an atonement with the other chatas, with the first one that was lost, and then you found it. Oh, chatas shekipru ba'aleha. It's one of the what's called chamesh chatois hamesas. There's 5 types of chatois, the karma chatas that the animals we left to die. One of them is shekipru ba'aleha ba'achar. The owner got atonement with another one. So then that's lamisa azla. So that means to say that the one that you exchanged to take its place is left to die. So obviously you're not going to violate Baal Ta'acha because it's left to die. I'm not bringing it as a carbon. So if it's the oila, chiluf oila, what do you mean? Of course it should have Baal Ta'acha. If it's chiluf chatas, there's no Baal Ta'acha. There's no one's bringing this. This hand must be left to die. So okay, l'may chiluf. So what are you going to say? Which is it an exchange for? Is chiluf taita? It's the exchange of a carbon taita. What's this talking about? For example, let's say you had a carbon taida. You were supposed to bring a carbon taida, and what happens is that you lost the carbon taida. So you went and you exchanged it for another one. You said you went to the and you went and said, okay, let this take the place. You went back to the store, you bought another animal, let it take the place. Then you found the first one. And then the two taidas got mixed together. Now, there's halacha that says al zevach ha'toida chalas. Specifically on the carbon taida, you bring certain loaves. You bring 40 loaves, which tells us only the taida requires loaves. When it says in the pasuk al zevach ha'toida chalas, tells us the taida requires loaves and not its chalifin. If you let's say it's tamura or the chalifin, some type of exchange for the original taida, they don't require bread. Now, the halacha is the Tani Reb Chia. He said that taida shenesav b'tmurasa. If the carbon taida gets mixed up in the one that you swapped it for, umesa achas mehen. Now one of the two animals died, and why did it have to be one of them died? Because Rashi explains that both of them would be alive, so you'd bring both of these animals, and you would just bring 40 loaves of bread, like the halacha of the taida, and you would say, let these breads be for the one that is the taida one, and the slaughtering of the taida is what sanctifies the 40 loaves according to its halacha. So Mamanashach, you'll have the 40 for the one, because the chalipin, which you don't know which one it is, the timur got mixed in, fine, the taida will have the loaves and the other one will not. But if one of them dies, says the Brisa that chaver to imla takana. So this other remaining animal has nothing to do with this animal. There's no way of fixing it. Why? Because what should you do? If you say, okay, sacrifice it, and sacrifice the breads with it, what dimah maybe it's the timur one which is not supposed to have the bread. And if you're going to say, okay, likrav b'loylach and bring without bread, well, dimah maybe it's the taida. So in that situation, there's nothing to do. There's nothing to do to fix the animal. And that's what Rashi explains. That's what the pasuk is coming to exclude from Bal Ta'acha. Meaning, there is a carbon over here. Meaning, by Oilo we said, Vasais, of course it's a Bal Ta'acha, it's a regular carbon. By Chatzis, Vasais, there is no carbon over here. It's left to die. Here, it's a carbon. But when it gets mixed up with the other one, you're not going to have Bal Ta'acha because Ein Lo Takana. That's what the Gemara is assuming right now. So it's like somewhere in the middle that you could say, we're not going to give you a Bal Ta'acha for this. But then the Gemara says, I don't understand. But since you cannot sacrifice this anyway, you told me, because it got mixed up with the original taida, and one of them died, and you don't know how to sacrifice it, so why do I need to tell you that loy sa'achal l'shal mai v'lei chilufav is excluding the chilufei taida that got mixed with the original taida, that then making Bal Ta'acha? What do you mean? You can't sacrifice this? A crow limely. What do I need a posse to tell me? It's no Bal Ta'acha. Hello, I can't even sacrifice it. What does that mean? How could I have violated Bal Ta'acha? Which you could hear a little bit because Lamaisa it is kosher, you just don't know if it's on your deal. But the Gemara is making Zali, even no, that's just a pashut. Why do I need a posse to exclude that you're not going to violate Bal Ta'acha in the case where you couldn't bring it anyway? So the Amar Sheish says, Lo'ilam, l'mu'utei chalufa oil v'shlam. Truth is that really when you're saying l'ta'acha l'shal moi, that don't delay paying it on time, and it's excluding its exchange, it's excluding the exchange of oil v'shlam. Then the question was, wait a second, oil v'shlam, that should be its regular carbon. Why don't you have Bal Ta'acha on the chalufim, on the exchange? Where you thought you lost it, then you found the original one, and you have this one remaining, it's a regular carbon. So it says, what are we talking about here? For example, an interesting case. What happened was, you had your carbon, but you're foil, you're a procrastinator, you're going to wait till the last second. So 2 Yom Tov already passed. And then it developed a blemish. So what do you do when you have a blemished carbon? You deconsecrate onto another one. And you say, let this one take the place of that one. So then the blemished one goes out and it becomes chul, and then now there's another one, the chilufim, takes the place. And now 1 Yom Tov already passed since you did the exchange. Oh, so you would have thought to say, since this is coming from the strength, the source of the first one, it should be like 3 Yom Tov already passed on this carbon. That's the chiddush. That's what the pasuk is saying. If on one animal you went and had 3 Yom Tovim passed, that's when you can be chayav. Not to combine the original and the chilufin to be 3 Yom Tovim. When we say lo sachal l'shalma v'le chilufim means to say that a balmum, and you deconsecrated that. That's what we're saying, that you're not going to have Bal Ta'achar. Of course you can end up having Bal Ta'achar, but a new count of Bal Ta'achar, not in combination with the original one. Now, but then the Gemara says, wait a second, that answer doesn't work according to everyone. According to Rabbi that he says, if you recall from the previous daf, his opinion was that you over Bal Ta'achar after one Yom Tov. That's already violating. Oh, it says Rosh Hashanah one Yom Tov, not even Sukkot. There's one month that says only Sukkot is the main. He says any one Yom Tov you're violating right away because he says Vavesim Shama Vasam Shama. So you're over Bal Ta'achar. So Mike, remember what are you going to say? You can't say the shtickle Torah that Huva Lechiluf is coming to exclude that already passed 2 Yom Tovim and then only one from the new one. There is always only one Yom Tov. So when would you have? What are you coming to exclude? Every animal, including the Chilufim, is going to have one Yom Tov. What are you saying that it's not going to combine? There is never a combination. So Amar Ravi says, no, you could say it even according to a mayor, in the Yom Tov Alei. And let's say you want to deconsecrate onto another animal. And then you have that the Yom Tov passed, which as Tais explains that Bal Ta'achar is only when the whole Yom Tov passes. So you would have thought to say, since this animal is coming from the source of the first one, it's like as if the whole Yom Tov passed it in this state of not having brought it. That no, you never had a full Yom Tov pass over this new animal, because in the middle of Chalamayit is when you went and you exchanged it. That's what it would be, even according to Rameh. Now, in the Brisa, additionally, we said that we said the pasuk says that look, if you're not going to pay your obligations on time, the pasuk ends, there's going to be in you a sin, which the Brisa had expounded means the v'leib v'karban chachat. But in the carbon itself will not be a sin, meaning the carbon is not going to be invalidated because of Bal Ta'achar. You just got an aver. Says the Gemara, is that really so that it's from this pasuk that you learn that this halacha that the carbon does not become invalidated? But we learn that from the others. The Tanya Luna Brisa Achem, remember the others, they say the following halacha. Yachol Yehei, you would think to say that b'chor she'avish nasai, a firstborn animal that already passed its first year. Now, the mitzvah is to bring the b'chor in its first year because it says in the Dvar Tezval, every single year you should bring b'chor and all those different things, and it says in that year, which it should be in that first year. So you would think if, let's say, the b'chor, the firstborn animal, has already passed its first year, that it would be kipsul hamakdashim, it would be like the invalidated karbanos, meaning like a balmum, like a blemished carbon, and therefore the yipasal, and it should actually be invalidated because since it already passed the first year, it was delayed that long. And Rashi explains that a year, generally, in most years, doesn't pass without having 3 Yom Tovim passed already. So you already went through 3 Yom Tovim. You would think once it's past its first year, it's invalidated. Psalm 11 is supposed to teach in the Varm. No, it says, you're going to eat in front of Hashem your God. Meiser, the gancha, the tithing of your grain, your wine and your oil, and the firstborn of your cattle and of your flock. Now this pasuk is being makish, b'chor l'meiser. It's equating, it's comparing, as we just read, the firstborn animal to the meiser, which the pasuk there is talking about meiser dagan, the tithing of the grain. So what do we learn from there? Ma meiser, just like meiser, in the nefsal mashon l'chaverta, does not become invalidated from one year to the next. Like Rashi brings the pasuk, it says miktzei shalosh shanim. If someone delayed doing his meiser the first year and the second year, he does what's called vita meiser. At the end of 3 years, he goes and then he brings this meiser. So obviously, it's not invalidated after the year. So even though it goes by years, so to the firstborn animal, although it's supposed to be in the first year, in a nifsal mashon l'chaverta, it does not become invalidated from one year to the next. That's what the Brisa says. Now, one thing we see is that we already see that when 3 Yom Tovim pass, like by B'char, which already passed the year, which is already 3 Yom Tovim, it does not become invalidated, the B'char, by passing already 3 Yom Tovim. So this is the source, from the Halacha B'char. So why are you telling me that you learn it from B'chai B'chachat, V'la B'kabat Chachat, as if we're learning from there, that it does not become invalidated? We already know from this teaching of the B'char that it doesn't become invalidated. He says, no, you need it especially for 2 sources. Because when you would have thought to say when did we say this halacha that does not become invalidated, the carbon is only by the firstborn animal, because it's not a carbon that's for appeasement. It's just like exercise akasa, really what a b'char is. But regarding the other karbanas, which they're for appeasement, whether for atonement, like a chatas and the asham, or whether as a gift, like an oil and the shlamim. So there, ema loy lirtzu, I would think that no, since you're bringing it in sin, because you violated Baal Ta'achar, that it would not be appeasing anymore and would not be acceptable. A bachar, fine, it's acceptable even though you made it Isser because it's not coming for hartzah. But by a carbon like an oila, which says is even that is like when you violate an asay, you bring an oila, so that has to be like appeasing, which is like this is not appealing over here. You really commit a sin with this by being over Baal Ta'achar. You would think it would not be acceptable. That's a chiddush that even over here, that even these karbanos that are b'nei hartzah are also valid even after you're Baal Ta'achar. The Gemara still asks, Markati still as a continent of Vav Med Aleph, is this really so that you know it from here? But as says the Gemara, Ben Azai Nafka, actually know it from a different source, from Ben Azai. It's not like the Brasa. Ben Azai, he says, Oisei Matam Alem, which this is brought in Teres Kayanim, and it's by the pasuk of Pigul. Pigul is when you have a machshava, when you're doing the avoid in the carbon, that you want it to be sacrificed or eaten beyond its time that it's supposed to be eaten. So it says there in the pasuk, Le'yirtza hamakrav oisai, that it would not be a willingness of the one who sacrifices it. Le'ichash won't be considered. So it says in the pasuk oisai. Why do you have to say oisai? We're talking about it. Why do you have to say it when you're mentioning pigul? Oh, because I'll tell you why it says benazir. Vishan, and because it says in the Varm, you should not be late in paying up your obligations. So Shemani, I would understand from that. That also if someone delays paying his vow on time, that also is like not acceptable. Just like when you do pigul, it's not acceptable. You do nice, all these different things not acceptable. So I would say also here that would invalidate the carbon. So as I said by pigul, it is a miyut. They say only pigul is below yiratza. But if you're just delaying, bring it on time, that's not going to make it below yiratza. So you see clearly that this halacha of that the carbon does not become invalidated by Baal Ta'achar is learned out from Oisai by pigul and not from Vay Bochachet V'Lei B'Kaban. So the Gemara retracts and says, you're right. Ella, you're right. B'Chachet, this time we're learning from the pasuk says that it's not going to be in unison. It's not saying V'Lei B'Kaban Chachet. Rather, it's V'Lei B'Ishtachachet. But there's not going to be sin in your wife. What does that mean? So good. I mean, you would have thought to say, "Hold on, Rabbi Yechon, since Rabbi Yechon says B'Tim some says Rabbi Lazar, Ein Ishta Shalom Mesa, the wife of a person doesn't die. Elam came back from him in the moment, unless they ask from him money and he doesn't have." Which Taisus brings that Rashi says in Zevachim refers to stolen monies. Taisus says no, it refers to a vow. I mean, if someone promised something and they say no, pay up, and they say, "Oh, Ainley says Chabnish," right? How do you know that then a person's wife Chas V'Shalom would die if they asking what he said he's going to give and he doesn't? Shenem, it says the pasuk Mishlei. Melechol Hasham, if you don't know what to pay, why should they take your bed from beneath you? Which that's a euphemism to the wife that's considered the mishkav, that they take the person's wife away. So Ema, I would say, B'hai Oven Baal Ta'achar Nami, which is very similar. It's essentially the same thing, just like a slow death. Not paying up is not paying at all. Baal Ta'achar is also just delaying that paying. You would think also Ishtay Mesa that his wife would die. Kamash Malam, that's the chiddush of the pasuk to say, that by delaying the payment, that you're not paying at all, that then it's only going to be a sin in the person and not in his wife. That's what we learn out. But actually, we know from Oiseh B'Pigul and not from Loy B'Chochet. Bring it to any time.